Many of you feel like you are hearing some new stories in the Bible that you haven't heard before. I wondered how this scripture would tie in with the themes of fall and Halloween and, wonderful monsters of all kinds. And I think the common thread is there's a lot of creepiness in this morning's service. I did not write this story, but we are going to dig into it. But first, I'm going to tell another story. This is a story that was told to me by my partner Piper's late grandmother, Ida. Now, I'm going to admit to you, Ida was always something of an anomaly to me. She looked like a traditional old-school grandmother with her curled hair and her modest dresses. But when you would visit her house, rather than homemade chocolate chip cookies, she would offer a strange assortment of highly processed foods, like Eggo waffles with vanilla ice cream and log cabin brand syrup on top. Once, on our way to a Thanksgiving meal, we were asked to pick up a gallon of milk. We arrived with local organic milk in a glass jar. She looked visibly confused and perhaps even a bit offended by what we had brought. When it came to food, and actually any number of other things, Ida and I just didn't seem to understand each other. And then one day at one of these meals, I sort of picked the short straw and I was sat next to Ida. And so I decided to ask her if she could tell me about her childhood. The eldest of 13 in a rural Maine French Catholic family, Ida was raised by her mother. Her father, a fur trapper, was away working for long stretches of time until at some point he just never came back. Ida, as the eldest, was often charged with caring for her younger siblings. Now, mind you, this was in a time where there weren't many social safety nets in place. There were no state or federal food assistance programs. So when the money ran out, Ida's mom, a proud and resourceful woman, went to work in the mill. Now, unfortunately, try as she might, young Ida couldn't keep up with her many younger siblings, and some of them found their way into trouble. Complaints were lodged, and the local authorities came to the house to demand that Ida's mother keep those children in line. When she explained her situation, that her husband hadn't returned, that she needed to work to feed her children, the town elders decided it would be better for all involved if Ida's mother would just stay home with the kids. In exchange, the town agreed that once a month, she could send Ida to the town hall with a wagon, and there they would give her enough flour, sugar, and lard to feed the children for the month. From then on, Ida's mother raised her own hens for eggs and meat, kept a garden for vegetables, and foraged for wild food and medicine herbs. But still, despite this tireless work, homesteading and raising 13 children, Ida's mother and all of the children were looked down upon. Ida let me know that she was proud that she had married well and that she had never needed to ask for help. And she made up her mind on her wedding day that she would always buy the good name brand foods for her children and her guests. Finally, the Eggo waffles and the aversion to local milk made sense to me. Social scientist and author Brené Brown says, "People are hard to hate up close, so move in." With a little curiosity and compassion, you might find that which seems incomprehensible in another begins to make a little more sense, which I think is actually what our text for today is all about. Here we are in the latter half of Genesis, and this story is sandwiched weirdly in the middle of the Joseph story, this salacious tale about a woman named Tamar. And though you just heard the story read, I want to tell it again, but slow it way down to add some context. So Judah, the patriarch of the story, was the fourth son of Jacob and Leah, and one of the older brothers of Joseph. The founder of the tribe of Judah, from which the kingdom of Judah and eventually even the term Jew are derived, this guy was kind of a big deal. And while initially he was involved in that unsavory plot to sell his younger brother, he later underwent a transformation, becoming a protective leader for his family and his younger brother, Benjamin. Now, I can only imagine that when Tamar's family made the deal with Judah for her to marry his eldest son, it must have been a hopeful union for such a young woman. She was marrying into a respectable and powerful family, one that she could certainly depend on to care for her. And she wasn't even the first foreign woman to marry into the family. Judah himself had married a foreign woman, a Canaanite, known in the text simply as the daughter of Shua. But then, before Tamar could become pregnant, God struck dead for reasons undisclosed aside for his wickedness. And so Tamar is given as a wife to his younger brother, Onan. Now, this may sound strange in our cultural context, but it's important to note that this was a common practice in the ancient Near East. Levirate marriage, as it is known, is when the brother of a deceased man is obliged to marry his brother's widow. Levirate marriages have long been practiced in societies with strong clan structures in which exogamous marriage, or marrying outside of the clan, is forbidden. At best, levirate marriages serve to protect widows and their children, ensuring that they are provided for. So as such, these marriages can serve as a vital social safety net when women are under the authority, are dependent on, are in servitude to, or are regarded as possessions of their husbands. It's also important to know that levirate marriages are still being practiced in some parts of the world even today. So it is in this fashion that Tamar is given as a wife to Onan, who is not only supposed to care for her as a wife, but also to impregnate her, providing an heir who will not be seen as Onan's heir, but as the heir of his late brother, Try saying that sentence 3 times fast. But though Onan both agrees to marry Tamar and does engage in sexual relations with her, the text specifies that he spilled his semen on the ground to keep her from providing offspring for his brother, thus avoiding his duty both to Tamar and to his larger family unit. Note, this is important to slow down. Note, it is not that he is not willing to take her on as a wife. He is willing to take her on as a wife. It is not that he is not comfortable being intimate with her. He is clearly comfortable being intimate with her. No, he is happy to have the sex, but he centers it on his pleasure rather than his relational commitment to Tamar and the family. So God is displeased with this behavior, and Onan dies too. Now Judah and the daughter of Shua do have a third son, Shelah, but he is too young to marry at that moment. So Judah sends Tamar back to live as a widow in her father's house. Now this is an interesting detail because despite the deaths of and Onan, Tamar has married into Judah's family, and it is actually his responsibility to take care of her. But instead, he sends her home to wait. And the text tells us that though Shelah's age is the reason given for Tamar's dismissal, Judah actually has some misgivings about letting her marry his third son. Perhaps he thinks there is something inherently wrong with Tamar, as if she is the reason his sons have died, rather than their own wickedness that the text lifts up as the reason. So at some point in the story, it becomes clear to Tamar that if she does nothing, she will remain in the house of her father, never remarry, and thus never bear an heir, thus forfeiting any chance for future lineage or future protection from a son. But Tamar is not willing to bear her misfortune silently. She is smart, she is resilient, and she is determined. And so, when she hears that Judah's wife has died and that he has weathered the appropriate mourning period, and that he will be traveling to Timnah to oversee the shearing of his sheep, she devises a plan. She puts on a veil and pretends to be a prostitute on the road to Timnah. The veil hides her identity from Judah, and Judah sleeps with her, but not before Tamar convinces him to give her his staff, his signet, and his cord, until payment has been rendered. All right, we're going to break that down. So in the ancient Near Eastern world, the staff was the symbol of authority and leadership, used by shepherds but also by tribal leaders. In this case, it represents Judah's status within his family and within the wider community. The signet was a personal cylindrical seal which was used to make an impression on document, like a stamp or like a signature would be today. It represented a person's identity, and in some cases, it also represented royal lineage. Finally, there was a cord attached to the signet, which serves as a binding pledge, and in some interpretations could symbolize the law. So perhaps we could think of this trio, the staff, cord, and signet, as being something like credit cards, ID, and a business license, right? Something to that effect. So after this encounter, Judah sends his friend to render payment and retrieve these important personal effects. But the prostitute is nowhere to be found. Furthermore, the local townspeople say they've actually never seen a prostitute in that particular location. To avoid humiliation, Judah drops the matter and tells no one what he has done, right? He says, we don't want to be the laughingstock. But then, 3 months later, news arrives that Judah's supposedly chaste daughter-in-law has turned up pregnant. He is told, your daughter-in-law Tamar has prostituted herself. Moreover, she is pregnant as a result of the prostitution. And Judah responds saying, bring her out and let her be burned. Now, Judah is supposed to be her provider and her protector, and this would be a significant dark mark on his reputation. It is at this point that Tamar shows her hand. She is a woman, she is a widow, and she's a widow who's been accused of prostitution. She has taken an incredible gamble, and her life is hanging in the balance. As she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law. It was the owner of these who made me pregnant. Take note, please, whose these are, the signet, the cord, and the staff. She calls him out, admitting her deception, but also drawing his attention to his own hypocrisy. Now, this could have backfired spectacularly, as it often does when the vulnerable confront the powerful, right? No one likes to be outsmarted, especially by someone whom they perceive to be as lesser. But to his credit, Judah immediately understands the situation he has put Tamar in. He sees how he has driven her to this act of desperation. She is more right than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah. And the text specifies he did not lie with her again. In other words, unlike his son Onan, Judah accepts that Tamar has done what she needed to provide an heir, to complete her socially prescribed duty, and to protect and care for herself. And although he could have, he does not take advantage of his position and further engage her in sexual encounters, but rather readmits her into the clan for care. Now, of course, the story doesn't end there. There are those two final tidbits. First is that Tamar gives birth to twins, right? Twin boys. This would have been seen as double blessing. But when the twins are born, we're told a new competition begins. One baby's hand emerges first. The midwife ties a red string to signify this is the firstborn child, only to have that hand drawn back in, and the other baby pushes out first, exiting the womb. This, of course, continues the Genesis pattern in which the elder brother never inherits because the younger brother takes his place. And we are told that it is Perez, the second twin, the one who pushed his way out first, who becomes the ancestor to King David and to Jesus. So this theme, the theme of the trickster, plays out again and again in Genesis. Abraham and Sarah trick the Pharaoh by claiming to be siblings so that Abraham is not killed. Jacob tricks his father Isaac to claim his brother Esau's birthright blessing. Lot's daughters trick their father into impregnating them to continue their clan lineage. These are but a few moments of narrative trickery that propel the story of God's people forward in Genesis. And Tamar follows suit in the trickery, tricking Judah in order that she would survive and be able to continue her lineage. This got me thinking about what it means to survive and even to thrive in a given cultural context. If the rules are made to privilege some, then perhaps only those with privilege can expect to succeed at the game of life by following the rules. I'm going to say that one more time, that's a lot. If the rules are made to privilege some, then perhaps only those with privilege can expect to succeed at the game of life by following the rules. Said differently, the dominant narrative is written by those in power, and thus we hear history through the lens of the people for and by whom the system was built. In that telling of the story, if you are good enough, if you are smart enough, then you will succeed. In that telling of the story, the inherent assumption is that our social, political, and economic structures are designed more or less as they should be. And if you are not thriving or surviving or successful within those structures, the problem is not the structures, the problem is you. But stories like Tamar's challenge that assumption. They poke holes in the idea that things are as they should be. These stories ask questions like, why, as the second child, should I not have equal access to the family's inheritance? Why, as a woman with marital or reproductive challenges, should I be forced to suffer on the margins? Why, as an immigrant or an outsider, should I be kept out of God's story? In seminary, I remember on numerous occasions being told that at its best, preaching should comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Which is, I think, what so many of these stories in the Bible, and especially in Genesis, do. The Bible provides this set of laws and rules and expectations, but then it follows them up with stories that complicate those very norms and expectations. It's not black and white. It's gray, intentionally. It's messy. It's human. Stories like Tamar's lionize qualities like ingenuity and resilience, creativity and perseverance. They push back on the notion that success and power are markers of God's favor, instead audaciously claiming God's presence on the margins and in the messes. In Tamar's story, God does not side with the powerful patriarch, Judah, but instead appears to ally and align themselves with this young foreign widow. So, what can we take from this salacious and audacious survival story? Well, first, I think for some of us, for the first time in our lives, we are finding ourselves in a societal context in which the structures in which we live feel maladaptive, feel maybe broken, feel like they're not working. They feel like they're maybe not working for us or not working for the people that we love. And this is really scary. It's scary to feel like the structures aren't working if you have been someone who has trusted in those structures, right? We may find ourselves wondering where God is in the chaos of the world around us. But then there are others among us for whom the fact that the dominant social structures don't represent them is old news. They never have, for a whole host of reasons. Maybe race, maybe class, maybe gender, maybe sexuality, maybe documentation status, maybe physical ability. For whatever the reason, there are those among us who have never felt protected or represented by the system because it was never built with them in mind. And so, I guess my first takeaway of this story is, if you have been at the center, try listening for the voices at the margins. These are communities and peoples with tools and strategies that have long been at work saving lives. And if you are on the margins, maybe the message is to trust that your voice and your wisdom are needed, maybe now more than ever. Perhaps your story is part of how we collectively will see and hear God's wisdom at work. Maybe you are part of how God is reshaping the world. And I guess for me, that's hopeful news. The second thing I take from this text is a reminder. When judgment rises up in me, when someone else's choices distress or disturb or disgust me, may Tamar's story be a reminder to me to move closer, to get curious, to ask some questions. That's a new perspective for me. I'd like to learn more. Could you help me to understand? Would you share how you got there or why you think that? Curiosity is one of the most effective tools for dismantling hatred. I'll say that again. Curiosity is one of the most effective tools for dismantling hatred. So I want to close with one final story. This is the story of Miss Major Griffin Gracie, a Black trans sex worker, a woman who spent time in prison for theft, and also an author, a parent, an activist, and a community organizer. Miss Major was a Stonewall Uprising veteran. Miss Major operated the first mobile needle exchange in San Francisco. Miss Major started the House of Gigi in Arkansas to support trans and gender nonconforming people. Miss Major, who at the height of the AIDS epidemic, when young men were dying and no one wanted to take care of them, organized groups of young trans women to be in those hospital rooms and care for the dying. Miss Major, who died on the 13th of this month at 78 years old, after a lifetime of advocating for marginalized communities, after a lifetime of being handed absolutely no power from the system, and yet working around it to create blessing everywhere she could. She was a guiding light for so many. As our Jewish siblings say, may her memory be a blessing. But perhaps even more than that, may her memory and memories of so many others who have had to be tenacious and resilient and creative on the margins in order to live and survive and thrive, may their memories be a catalyst for compassionate change, so that all of our memories might one day be a blessing. Amen.